Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Climate Conversation brought to you by the Windsor Park Neighborhood Association. My name is Martin Luecke, and I'm chair of the Climate Committee. And tonight we've got a great show for you. We're going to learn everything about the COP26 International Climate Conference that occurred in Glasgow, Scotland back in November. And we have two great panelists for you who both attended the conference. First is Austin Mayor Steve Adler, who is here with us now, and he is waving. And also, I'm going to have my co-host, Barrett Sundberg, introduce our other panelists.
Hello, everyone. We're absolutely delighted tonight also to have with me Hernandez. She is the Southeast Regional Coordinator for the Citizens Climate Lobby, covering the states of Florida, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. She also interacts with Citizens Climate Lobby here in Austin, who referred us to her when we were looking for people who actually attended the climate conference of COP26. She'll be able to tell you much more shortly about the active roles that she played at the conference. It's quite exciting, but she has a long and wonderful history as a citizen activist. Prior to CCL, she volunteered as the co-host of a Spanish language talk show based in Southwest Florida. And while at this position, she did a lot of interviews with political candidates and politicians. She's volunteered with a variety of environmental organizations and is the mother of two wonderful boys. We're very honored to have such a high-powered citizen activist with us. Solemi.
And also I want to say hello to the mayor. If you're sitting by patiently, just wanted to let you know that Solemi is going to give us some background on COP26 because nobody knows anything about it. We don't understand how any of it works. It seems to be a bit complicated. So bear with us so that we can kind of get the viewing audience up to speed on what it is we're actually talking about.
All right, so I'm going to share my presentation. And well, hello everyone, and welcome to this presentation, and thank you to the Windsor Park Neighborhood Association for inviting me to speak today and bringing these important conversations to our community. One thing that I didn't put and talk about me, my mantra, it's action is the antidote to despair. But thank you so much for that introduction. I want to give a little background of what CCL is and the work that we do.
So let me, I need to break in here because I'm seeing a screen. Is everyone seeing the screen correctly here?
Yeah, we're seeing the speaker notes showing up.
We're seeing speaker notes right now, so we can't see what your actual image is.
All right, so let's try to do this again. Are you seeing my speaker notes again?
Yes, we're seeing speaker notes, and on the side is your actual slides.
I am so sorry. That shouldn't be the case. I just share it. And how about now? You still see my speaker notes?
Yeah, we're still seeing your speaker notes.
Just drag them down.
Can I share my presentation and you can share it while I am presenting?
Sure.
Sure.
I don't know. Or let me try to do this one more time. I don't know why this happened because we just try it and it did work. There we go. Let's try to do this again.
Well, we have to have technical problems. You know that. We're still on.
Can you see?
Still seeing just speaker notes.
Okay,
well,
so
we're pressed for time here. We need to just go ahead and get started. If you can, Solemi, work it out the best you can here.
Let me go ahead and can I share this presentation and the chat, and maybe we can you can share the presentation for me.
Yes, in fact, why don't you email it to or share it with gmail.com, and let me ask a question or two to Mayor Adler about his participation in COP, even though it's coming at it from a different angle. So we'll come back to you in just a minute after you send that to Selwyn.
Yeah, can you put that email in the chat, and I will be sending it right now. I'm sorry about that.
I put it in the chat.
So Mayor Adler, just coming out of the blue, we asked around Austin who had attended the COP26 conference. You were the one person we found who attended. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to go to this conference and what your participation was?
Sure, and I appreciate the opportunity to be back with Windsor Park again. So thanks for the invite. I went, Commissioner Shea also attended. Austin has been a leader on climate change mitigation among cities for a long time. We were one of the first cities to really invest real dollars in renewable and sustainable energy at a time when not too many people were. And we did it as a city, even though it was at a higher cost than other power generation, but because it was important to our local community culture and values. And early participants helped the technology grow so that the price could come down. So we've been a leader for a long time among other cities. One of the things that's led to is Austin's participation and leadership in the C40 group of cities, which is a group of climate mitigation forward-leading cities around the world, all really focused on helping to drive climate change agenda and mitigation among other cities. And it's something that I've invested a lot of time in over the last 7 years that I've been in office. The COP26 is the kind of the international meeting focused on climate change mitigation that has been built around nation states, so countries organizing to drive the agenda. The United Nations taking a significant leadership role, but cities have participated alongside. I actually attended the Paris Accord COP, the meeting there where the Paris Accords were signed. And everybody focused on what was happening to the nation states. But there was also at that meeting the largest collection of mayors in one city, I think they said in like the history of the world. There were like 800 or so mayors. And that's, I think, real significant because if you look at the Paris Accord climate mitigation goals, about half of them are achieved at the local level. At the regional level, because local governments oftentimes make choices about energy generation, about building plans, and whether you have charging stations and the like. So cities have always been really activated, and the C40 as an international organization has always had a presence at the meetings to cajole and to push the nation states to perhaps act more urgently than they might otherwise.
Well, I think our viewers can appreciate with needing to push larger organizations to do things. We appreciate your role. I think Solemi's ready to introduce some more of the process from her grassroots perspective as well. Solemi?
Yeah. And I just want to add to the work that the mayor is doing. It's essential that we work together with local elected officials to do the work that I'm going to present right now, which is our grassroots organizing to advance climate action. So we were in the second slide. So I was saying that I wanted to talk a little bit about what CCL is and what we do. So CCL, it's Citizens Climate Lobby, is a volunteer-driven organization organized by locally by chapter. A group of a chapter is a local team that is creating political will and clear evidence that citizens support action on climate change in their communities. Citizens Climate Lobby has hundreds of groups across North America, Europe, Australia, Africa, Asia, and Central America. We organize ourselves and our activities around these 5 levels to divide and accomplish. First, we lobby our elected officials and show them that their constituents want them to lead on climate. We use media to write letters to the editors, op-ed, we get endorsements for editorial boards, and we work across social media platforms. And the grassroots engagement, we secure endorsement for local respected influential leaders. Our grassroots include emails, polls, education, training, and engaging people to climate action. And the group development, we get volunteers into action, and we empower them to take leadership positions and support them through training and education. This methodology has made us accomplish the first bipartisan climate solution caucus in the US House and in the Senate. We helped introduce the first bipartisan carbon fee and dividend legislation in the US in 2018 in both of the chambers. We helped pass a carbon fee and dividend legislation in Canada in 2018, and we have advanced climate legislation all around the world. So let's go dive right into the COP process. So what is COP? The Conference of the Parties, or COP, is an annual 2-week meeting of 197 parties, 196 nations, plus the European Union. These parties are signatory to the 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which I'm going to start to refer as UNFCCC. The COP agenda is
Say that again.
So, of course, so the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change for 1992, that was the first one. And we refer to it, the initials are UNFCCC.
So this is the, just speaking in for the viewers, let me make sure why I'm catching here. So this is the actual global attempt to do something about climate change, right? This is the all the countries working together?
Yes, 197 nations, 196 nations and the European Union, and this started in 1992. And they call it, it's a treaty, and they call it the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and UNFCCC, or CCC.
Okay, and I'm passing on a request from our volunteer Selwyn, who is running the slides. So can you cue him when he should change the slides?
Sure, I can, of course. So to continue with the COP actually is 5 parallel processes involving the 197 parties. These processes are the Conference of the Parties to the Convention, which is the COP. It could be the COP21, which it was when the Paris Agreement was signed. It could be COP25 or COP26 or COP27. Another process is the meeting of the parties in service of the Kyoto Protocol, or CMP. We got the meetings of the parties in service of the Paris Agreement, CMA. We have the subsidiary body for implementation of all these talks that are happening. And we have the subsidiary body for scientific and technical advice, SBSTA.
I have a question here real quick, Solemi. Actually for the mayor. Mayor, which one of those 5 were you involved in?
We were involved in COP, but as an auxiliary. So those are nation states that really participate in those. So we were there. I was there in part of the delegation representing the United States Conference of Mayors and the C40 organization.
Thank you. Go ahead, Solemi.
Yeah, we're an observers. We are the people who, the mayor and I were part of what we call the observers, and we are there to keep the transparency of the whole process. That's our main goal. So it's important not to be intimidated by the complexity or unpredictability of the COP process. In our delegation, we are encouraged to embrace complexity, study the process, and get comfortable with a dynamic schedule that change, and evolve according to forces that we cannot control. This is natural byproduct of a process that brings together, imagine that, diplomats for 196 nations and observers for thousands of organizations across the world to have a discussion about the details of 5 structured processes for implementing a treaty that mandates transformational action. Observers like myself and the mayor interact officially with the United Nations Climate Change Convention process through a defined constituencies, some of which are named in the convention and others are named in the Paris Agreement, but all of which have a standing as representatives of stakeholders across the world. And we can go to the next slide.
So let me see if I'm catching this. It sounds like almost a miracle in a way, in that in the history of the world, I'm not sure the globe has ever really cooperated on anything before, other than I guess there must have been some cooperation on like the hole in the ozone layer. But this conference is so huge because there's, if I'm hearing you right, there's not just a bunch of representatives from the countries, but also you guys, the observers, actually representing all these different organizations kind of the people in the actual process, at least by observing and talking to the nation representatives.
Yes, so we can have bilateral. I'm going to touch a little bit about what we did. We can bilateral meetings where you can, like, for example, work something, the mayor could work something in their city related to, you know, energy efficiency or whatever. But reality, each organization has the option to submit comments to the COP presidency with the suggestions. I know I work with Action for Climate Empowerment, and we had the opportunity to draft a document that was going to be taken in consideration for the Glasgow work program that deals with civic engagement and action for climate empowerment. Many other organizations came together and put the suggestions as well. Many of the suggestions were taken, many weren't. We were looking for the safeguards in human rights, and that includes women's rights. I mean, we're talking about a global scale, right? You have women's rights, you get indigenous rights. And in other countries, the reality is activists, we are very privileged in this country, but in other countries, activists can get killed for doing this work. So we're just advocating to the United Nations to get those safeguards for those activists so they can continue doing their work.
I have another question for the mayor now that we're kind of seeing some of this. When you were there, were you able to submit any kind of comments to anyone in particular? How did you work within that space?
Well, at the C40, I mean, at the COP26, there are people there from all over the world. So you have the formal delegations that are from the countries that are there ostensibly to negotiate the next round of the international treaty. You have organizations like her organization and thousands of others across the world. You have cities that are represented. You have lots of folks represented, and it's like a big convention. So you have a big hall that has booths that are set up, and they're big tents and big buildings. And there's a series of lectures and panels and discussions that you can participate in, that you go and you watch. It's a networking opportunity internationally. All the while, this backdrop is of the national representatives in the interior space working out and negotiating language changes. So during the course of the time I was there, I missed the first week because we were having a local election here in town that I was interested in November. But as soon as the election was over, a few days later, I went out. So I was there for the second week of the 2-week exercise. And I had the opportunity to meet many people in our national delegation. I spent a lot of time with mayors who were collected around the country, around the world. I participated and spoke in a half dozen different panels. I had probably most significantly a meeting with the United Nations Secretary General, together with the mayor of London, who's the president of C40, and a couple other mayors toward the end of the second week, when he was pretty frustrated that the nation states were not stepping up to do the things that he wanted done. And we had the opportunity to speak with him about a greater role that cities might be able to play, to push and cajole and develop political pressure on countries to participate. Things that we might be able to do as cities. I suggested, and I think that Austin would participate in trying to create a fund financed by cities, primarily in the Northern Hemisphere, to help with work of cities in the Southern Hemisphere, where some of the most important work needs to be done, but where the capital is hardest to come by. The Secretary General and the COP26 organizers are trying to get the countries around the world to step up and do a better job of that. And I think, once again, it may very well be the cities that have to show the way. But that's a question. I mean, would we as a city owning our own power company be interested in sending $1 million to an international fund created by cities to help cities that need assistance to participate? Is that something that we would do the same way our power company provides low-cost utilities to people in our community that can't afford that? Would we want to do that too? My sense is that this community would, and I think that other cities around the world would. So I participated in that meeting with the Secretary General. I had the chance. I didn't meet Solemi while she was there, but I did have the chance to meet with other organizations doing the similar kind of work. I am working with a lot of the youth groups for C40, together with the mayor of Los Angeles and the mayor of Freeport in South Africa, working on youth programs. So I had the chance to meet with some of the youth who are putting on a lot of pressure. And we're all in this kind of like United Nations village. It takes a while to get in and out of, because you might imagine security's tight, and the closer you get to the interior where the national delegations are, it gets harder and longer to be able to access those spaces. And you might imagine lots of demonstrations in and around the outside of the facility. So I had a chance on behalf of the city, our city, to meet with lots of people.
Well, thank you for that. That's a very good explanation, and that definitely is the kind of pressure and work that we're hoping for from a citizen level. I'll say that.
So Solemi, can you encapsulate a little bit more of how some other processes work here, so we can kind of get to the rest of this? I hate to cut you short, but we want to kind of get to some of these questions. We've got people online who are sending us questions as well. So the whatever else we need to understand, that's what we need to know right now, so we can wrap our arms around how big this is.
So let's jump. I'm going to go in slide number 5. A little bit, our delegation was 15 badges. We got 33 people in there. We had people working remotely. We have people with party badges, and 2 of them were actively negotiating for their countries. And like the mayor said, we tracked 310 contacts across 531 affiliations. Like the mayor said, we participated in one way or another in 237 events. There were 50 bilateral meetings, that is meetings that occurs in the site with specific people. We have meetings with 11 ministers and head of states, our group delegation. We created a virtual platform to make the COP accessible to people who cannot attend. I'm going to talk a little bit about that because that was my work. And we have one of our members talking to the high-level segment to the COP presidency. This was huge.
This is amazing. So if I'm hearing you correctly, well, I mean, Citizens Climate Lobby is purely a citizen group. It's voluntary activists. It's just people pitching in from all over the world. And you're saying that that here at the actual, like, where the international agreements are being formed, you actually had 6 people representing countries from that perspective, like accepted by the countries as the representative?
Yeah, so the way that works is that these are people that have started attending the COPs with us. We have like around 10 COPs going already. This is my second one, but our whole group is going to this COPs for like 10 years. And we have people that have been coming from other countries. We give them the badges because they're part of Citizens Climate International, and they have acclimated to this process, and now they're part of the country, represent their country, and they can be on the negotiation. So that's pretty exciting. That's what we aim to do: empower people to become those climate leaders that we need so much to tackle this climate crisis. So, yeah, really excited. So we can go to the next slide.
We're going to talk about the commitments that are made by the countries that attended. Is that what this is about here?
Yes, this is a little bit of it because there was a lot. So I'm going to touch real quick on this. There was an alliance to phase out coal. This was with 48 national governments, 48 subnational governments, and 69 organizations. There was an initiative called Regen 10 that works with over 500 million farmers to scale regenerative food production by 2030. Over 450, and this was a big one, financial institutions with 130 trillion in assets compromised to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Over 100 nations pledged to cut 30% of their methane emissions. We got 130 nations that occupied 90% of the global forest agreed to cease and backpedal from deforestation by 2030. We got zero emission transport with more than 100 nations, cities, and states. The Climate Achievement Declaration, 19 countries sign up to a zero emission shipping route. Another one that is not there, the US and China announced at the COP that they were going to work together to reduce carbon and methane gases. And there's more, but unfortunately, we don't have the time to cover that. Next slide, please.
This brings up a question for the mayor, just as I'm seeing these agreements that, and really this is more of a question about the volunteer part of this organization and this conference. And Mayor, we've got here in Austin things that we can do to get to zero emissions. What now is the target for the city of Austin to get zero emissions?
Our goal had been to get to zero carbon by 2050. And we just moved our goal up to 2040 as part of the recently adopted climate equity plan in Austin. And every several years, we've been updating our climate plan. I'll see if I can get the link and put it into the chat box here in just a second. But we have goals that are shorter term than that, 2030 goals to get kind of the stepping stones that we need to solve in order to be able to get to where we need to get to. We've gotten to zero carbon emissions effectively out at the airport. One of the first to do that. City municipal operations. So we really are among cities not the best, because we clearly are not that. But among cities, we're probably in the top 0.5% of cities in the world, which is why the voice in Austin, collectively with other cities and organizations, is really powerful. The work that we have done in this city with respect to renewable energies, wind and solar, has been real important. The electrification that we're doing right now with our fleets in the city, the changes we're making to the building code, and the adoption of our 100-year water action plan in the city. But we're identifying the goals we need to meet, and then we're pushing through with those. For us, the next really big challenge is transportation, because that's where, we live in Texas, everybody loves their cars. But the work with Project Connect is a really significant investment by the community to change the fact that 71% of the people who are going downtown to work every day are doing it alone in their cars. We have to get to a 50-50 split by 2039 if we're going to make the kinds of goals. So Project Connect's a big part of that in our city. I saw one of the questions about the Fayette coal plant. We need to be able to close that. And I guarantee you on the first day I came into office, that was a priority and remains the priority of our entire council. It's complicated because we don't own that ourselves. If we did, we could turn it off, but we don't. And the goal here is to try and get it closed, not just give it to somebody else who's going to keep it on or expand its operations. A lot of the conversations on that right now about, because they're confidential by law, but I guarantee everybody on this call that we've been working nonstop to try and figure out the strategies and continue to try strategies to get that closed. As a practical matter, given the economics right now of coal generation, I don't even think our partners are going to want to keep it open too far, much farther into the future. But this is a city that everybody should be really proud of in terms of the things that we're doing. Our staff is advising other staffs around the country, and I travel to many of these international meetings with our staff where we're sharing with other countries, but also learning from other countries. COP27 is going to be coming up this year. It happens every year. COP27 is going to be in Egypt this year. The C40, that'll probably be November-ish timeframe. The next international C40 meeting will be in Buenos Aires in probably October. And in case anybody here wants to make either of those trips, we could probably accommodate that.
Well, that would be very interesting to be on the ground for one of those to see how it actually works. I know that this a year ago right now, Austin was frozen along with the rest of Texas. And that is one of the reasons why it's complicated to shut down Fayette, because as we understand it, we're worried about not having enough power if that should occur again. And there's that complication of keeping open things that will back up in the case of a massive freeze. And I'm assuming that's part of what you're talking about, Mayor.
It's part of that, but I'll tell you, if that was the only thing, we would have that plant closed by now because it's coal. And in terms of that immediate ability to be able to fire up a plant in the middle of the night when the wind's not blowing, in order to make sure we have some generation into the city, is something that could be achieved with things like natural gas. I mean, there are other things we could do that would be less offensive than nuclear power. And I think that the technology is getting to the place soon, I hope, where batteries will enable us to be able to produce and then store power for those times when we need it. But you're right. I mean, those things all play into the equation. The biggest challenge we have right now is we don't own it ourselves. So it's not like we can decide what we think is best and then just make it happen.
And for
so I don't want to beat the one thing into the ground, but I do want to thank Hope Wilson, who one of our viewers who asked the original question a minute ago about withdrawing from Fayette power plant. But just one aspect, she was asking about there was a plan to withdraw. And if I'm remembering correctly, the plan was at some point just a couple of years ago to close Fayette in 2022. Is there any chance of actually closing it in 2022?
I was part of the council that set that goal because it looked to us when we were setting it that we would be able to do that. But the problem is, the challenge is that we don't own it ourselves. We own it with the LCRA. So contractually, as a matter of law, we can't just go in and flip the switch and close it because they have an equal right to keep it running. So as you might imagine, and there are a lot of things I can't talk about, but you can fill in a lot of the blanks just by knowing those basics. So then the question is, what kind of incentives can we provide? What kind of pressure can we bring? What kind of legal arguments can we make? How can we assert a position? What can we offer? What trades might we be willing to make? And we're constantly trying to figure those things out. If the moment that there's a path, this city's going to take it.
Well, I do want to say on behalf of a number of activists that we appreciate what you were saying now and before about looking for a path to actually get commitment from the LCRA that essentially it really will close. It'll be replaced by something that's renewable. It won't be rerun separately as a coal plant just under somebody else. And that is kind of the real solution. And I do applaud you doing having the focus on that hard work of getting a good solution.
I imagine if we would
keep up the pressure there.
Yeah, we could sell our interest, right? We could take Austin out of the coal plant, but that doesn't meet our goals unless the coal plant closes. And if we just sell our interest in the coal plant, then we have no control over the operation of that plant. So we're in that kind of awkward place. But I hear you, right? I hear you. And I promise you that the moment there's a path, I'm sure that this city is going to take it.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm going to give one question from a viewer that's related before we get back to the overall kind of flow of the conference. And this is from a viewer named Matt Weldon, and he's asking, are we doing everything we could even on things like, I guess, carbon capture? He's saying that we could create carbon capture capacity. And he thinks that it could be that we could get kind of all of it by 2050 for 2% or less of GDP. Is that something realistically that relates to how we would fulfill these goals? And what's the city's stance on that briefly?
Well, in order for us to be able to get to zero carbon emissions by 2040, we're going to have to be both creative and disciplined. We can't do it alone with carbon capture. At this point, the technology doesn't exist for us to be able to do it at our municipal level at a cost that makes it realistic and feasible. But we can pick off the low-hanging fruit, which we need to do in order to get to where we need to be by the end of this decade. The last little bit is going to be the hardest to do. But we're doing everything we can. The citywide efforts with respect to resource recovery, trying to keep things out of landfills is part of what we're doing. Planting trees, part of what we're doing, and that has a carbon capture component to it. But there are probably, if you read that report that was that someone put up on the screen a second ago, and I ought to put the link in here somewhere if someone would do that for the climate equity plan. It's pretty specific about the things we're doing and the goals we need to reach and the ways to get there.
I want to add, there's a lot of money too on the, well, not a lot, but some of the money allocated for carbon capture technology in the infrastructure package. And that's when you think about the COP, it's thinking globally and acting locally. That's the perfect phrase for us to see this whole process and how we have to look forward our climate action. So, all right. Sorry for overwhelming you with so much information, but it's fun. So it's okay. So I think that was in number 6. Next slide. Okay, official, that one.
Well, you know what? I'm curious here because we've only got about 20 minutes left. I'm curious, Solemi, when you went into this particular conference this time, and you'd been into it once before, did you have some kind of idea of the way things were going to work or what you were going to be able to accomplish that you were able to do?
Well, we were already focused on action for climate empowerment. Like I said, we spent the first 3 days trying to draft this document to submit to the COP presidency. That was to be part of the Glasgow work program. We didn't get what we wanted, which it was human rights included on this work program document, but we did get the recognition of communities and non-party stakeholders and facilitated action for climate empowerment. And the parties were encouraging the public participation in climate policy design. But reality, I came more energized of let's build a movement, and we don't have to be looking for hope. We are the ones who have to create that hope. I mean, that's how the vision I think for. I'm sorry, the slide before, I think then I'm gonna go real quick because this is like the official things. I already went through it. So in the official outcomes, they, for the first time, this is unbelievable, but in this COP, this is the first time they mentioned to phase down the use of coal. The first time. Now, look at the word, phase down, no phase out. They also commit to phase out inefficient fossil fuel. The question is, what are inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, right? That opens a loophole. So there was a big talk about keeping 1.5 alive, and that was kept. We doubled the finance support for adaptation. They work in a rule book for the Paris Agreement, Article 6, that is all about carbon markets. It's like the more contested article of the Paris Agreement. Financial institutions consider climate vulnerability and wanted to offer support in a financial way. The Glasgow program for action for climate empowerment, we got that there, which is all about public information and climate civics. And there were dialogues between parties in relevant organizations and stakeholders for funding activities averted to minimize and address loss and damage. This is a big deal. Loss and damage are the countries that don't have the money to transition, but they are facing the worst of climate change. There's islands disappearing in the Pacific. So, and this is an article of the Paris Agreement to Article 8. So that was a big deal because it's all about environmental justice. And next, my work was everything with action for climate empowerment. And action for climate empowerment is described on Article 6 of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, and it's the Article 12 of the Paris Agreement. Next slide. ACE recognizes the transformational power of education, training, public awareness, public participation, public access to information, and international cooperation working in coordination. By breaking traditional silos between academia, the workforce, community organizing, youth, science, and communications. And ACE strategy can reach all of society in ways that are relevant to them, empower them to take just, effective, community-based action to address the climate crisis. Next slide, please.
Well, I just want to jump in right there and say, I think that's what we're doing right now. We're actually bringing this out in a way where, anybody who's watching now can get an understanding of how this actually works. And with the mayor here, we're seeing how complicated it really is to actually, really do something on the ground here in our own home backyard. And I wanted another question to the mayor in regard to what you thought you were going to be able to accomplish when you went to this meeting, and then what happened.
I went to the meeting really with a city agenda. Frankly, I'm not sure I expected the nation states to do as much as they did do, because when they get together, so much of their direction on climate change mitigation is driven by other geopolitical issues. Whether or not we can agree with the Chinese government on really major steps, oftentimes is more a reflection of where we are on intellectual property negotiations and tariff negotiations than it is climate change issues. But the cities are focused. Our relationship with cities inside China can really focus on this issue, because we don't need to concern ourselves with the same geopolitical issues. So with a drumbeat, we're trying to get more and more cities involved, more and more cities engaged, more and more local communities engaged, because I believe over time that's going to bring along the nation states around the world. And frankly, there are a lot more cities that are doing just phenomenal things because communities are inclined to do it. But we live in Texas, right? So, but yet Austin's one of the leading cities in the country. There are other cities that are doing phenomenal work. And when you look at the impact that the youth has had on changing the debate around the world right now on climate mitigation matters, my daughters, their friends, really upset with people my age and my generation for the condition that we're left the world and the inability to act with the urgency that's necessary. I think cities could also do that. And so I was pitching that. I did not anticipate that I would actually find myself in a room with the Secretary General of the United Nations. And there's a chance he could come to Austin in March.
We're South by Southwest, of course.
Right, and that's what we're pitching, because I want him to talk to the mayors in Texas about that, and I want him to see, what's happening in some of our cities. So I went with that agenda, and for that agenda, it worked really. We exceeded expectations. First, in getting that meeting, and then getting a commitment from the Secretary General that cities would have a bigger role at COP27 in Egypt. That is also hard, because the nation states don't want cities to have a bigger role. The nation states, at some level, really don't want cities talking to one another. If the cities would go through their federal governments, I think that the federal state departments around the world would be pleased with that. That way they could more ably control the conversation and the variables and the uncertainties. So what we're asking for really puts the Secretary General at odds with the countries that he's their executive director in the United Nations. So these kinds of debates are hard.
It seems like the cities have less red tape to deal with and less bureaucracy. And so action is a lot faster.
Easily, that's true. Evidence the fact that how much we did on climate change mitigation and sustainable, renewable energy sources well before it was happening around the state. In fact, we got criticized for a long time. The legislature was going to take away our power company and let us all sign up for power from Adler or from one of the private power companies that are responsible for the grid in Texas. Every year, 2 years, we fight in Austin to keep Austin energy something that we control. And in my 2 terms here as mayor, one of my big fears was that I would be mayor the year that the state legislature took away our local power company. And every 2 years, it's been a big part of the work that I do to try and prevent that from happening in a legislature that really isn't inclined to do Austin any favors. But we have to fight to hold on to that, because that's how we influence energy policy, both in our state and around the country.
Solemi, was there anything else that you had for us from COP26?
Yeah, I have, but we're going short of time. So, I just kind of say that we worked with the USA Coalition last year to create a national strategic framework for the United States. We joined leaders joined to create this strategic roadmap for encouraging, informing, and empower the public to tackle the climate crisis. Our goal was to push the United States and other nations to meet and exceed the targets of the Paris Agreement by centering climate action, empowering the people. So we got a book, and the book, it was the slide that you saw before. And I'm honored to be a facilitator for that book. That's why I got so passionate about this work and the COP. And then we got some funds real quick within 2 weeks, because we wanted to make this COP process accessible to people that cannot make it. It's a privilege to be there. So we got a platform where we were having sessions for people to see informational sessions about action for climate empowerment. We did have some booths where people could sit with delegates and talk about what is the climate smart ideas. And we could, relay that to our group and kind of push forward those ideas for stakeholders back home that cannot make it here. This year, we're planning to do this bigger and better with more time, and we want to offer it to everybody across the world that cannot make it here, because the information that is shared here is so valuable. And if people that back home will have access to this, it will be so much easier, we'll be more informed. That's the issue. We're not talking to each other. That's why the mayor was so powerful with the league, with all the mayors from all the cities in the world. That's what it makes us stronger, when we come together and we can find that common ground and work and walk the same path. So, and yeah, I think, and we had, it was open for 2 weeks, 60 sessions, 100 participants, because it was a pilot. What they were saying, despite that the Glasgow negotiations does not yet meet the 1.5 word, and it's hard to believe businesses and governments and finance leaders, when they have not been trustworthy in making their pledges a reality. I am hopeful and energized, because even though COVID safety measures play a role in severe access restriction experienced by many, including myself, compared to prior COPs, this was so restricted. And I think this influenced the negotiation. If civic society and also service could have more access to these negotiations, I think the outcome would be a lot better. And despite that, we had a way, like the mayor said, sometimes, I don't know, Mayor, but I was sometimes 2 hours outside in the cold rain waiting to get in, because there were so many people. That didn't stop anybody or diminish the commitment of civil society to have a voice and influence the process. And the people are creating hope with the inspired work they're doing everywhere. I am grateful for having the opportunity to meet the most amazing activists and government officials that are taking meaningful actions, like the mayor here. For the COP process to be successful, stakeholders' voices, needs, and aspirations must be welcomed to drive this ambition. We have to develop strong civic engagement, build capacity, give that access to information, communication, and coordination, and only by working together we can do that.
Well,
I want to put in.
I want to say, speaking of access, it sounds like when you're there giving access to, when you say citizens, it sounds like we need to be on that, Barrett. We need to be with that access so that we can then bring that to Windsor Park and Austin directly. Now, what do you think, Mayor? That's what, and of course we'll be in touch with you as well before you leave, so we can at least touch base about that you're going and what your goal is.
And I think that's great, and I'm going to need to leave here in the next minute, and I apologize for that. But I answered one of the questions in the chat. What can neighborhoods do? And the answer to that, I think there's a macro answer and a micro answer. And the micro answer is get everybody in the neighborhood to turn out their lights when they leave a room. Compost, which now is citywide in our city for everyone to participate in. I mean, it's making those individual choices. But second, it's a question of priorities. And that's the last question I asked, right? So, every year we do a budget, and we have to decide between climate change mitigation efforts in parks and music support and equitable healthcare delivery and all of those things. And each of those issues have groups that believe that their issue is the highest priority and the thing that is most important. So politically in this city, if this is a significant priority, then people should make their views known to the city council, to the commissioners court. Bridget Shea is on the national board. The parallel to C40 with cities. There's one for counties, and Commissioner Shea is one of the officers of that organization. So we push that. That's a priority in our city, always has been. And in part, we believe that, people like to live in this city in part because of that. The money that we invest to keep Barton Springs clear and crisp, the money that we spend to buy land in the hill country to preserve it, and those kinds of things are part of who we are. So I would urge people, neighborhood one, to get everybody to do the micro stuff. That plan, that climate equity plan, I would pass it around and let people read it, because there will be parts of that resonate with people. And then I would say, be politically involved. Push that agenda both locally here and nationally. Vote for candidates that are talking about making this their priority effort, because they're getting pulled 1,000 different ways. People should be weighing in on that. But everybody should be proud. This city is doing a lot already.
Mayor, really appreciate you stopping by, and we will be in touch, and hopefully we'll have another conversation in the future about what's going on at that time, and hopefully it'll be good news.
That sounds good. Invite me back anytime to the neighborhood association. I'd love to be with you guys.
Will do, sir.
Solemi, it was good to meet you. Thank you.
So with that, we've got just a couple more minutes. And Barrett, are there any other questions or things that came up that we should cover at the moment? Anything for Solemi?
We've covered a lot of the questions that were received. There's one very specific one that didn't come up elsewhere. And I can't find the exact wording, but it was about is there any discussion at COP26 about beef and dairy and the effect of food on methane and things of that nature? To your knowledge, Solemi?
Yeah, they were at veterinary agriculture, like sustainable food production, food waste. It's always a conversation. And like I said before, there was a compromise to reduce 30% of methane emissions by 2030.
Methane is really the hidden danger on this planet, in my opinion. And so any efforts that we can take to reduce methane is extremely important, which is also part of what the mayor was saying with everyone composting. If you compost, then we can control the methane that is produced by the composting process. If we just dump it into a big pile, then the methane eventually escapes and we don't control it. And so that is a silent killer because we have so much methane that's being released right now by the permafrost melting in the northern parts of the globe. So
yeah, we're kind of blessed with having already moved forward citywide, as the mayor said, by having composting available as part of the city process. So if any viewers can, in their own homes, or influence any neighbors to, fully use that composting option, that is good, because methane affects the climate much more quickly than the other greenhouse gases. Most of what's there comes and goes in a matter of just a few years. And so if we keep improving our composting and things like that, it can have the quickest effect to help us mitigating these things. So, but overall, I just want to thank Solemi and Citizens Climate Lobby for participating with us and doing the work they do, going to the conference. I did not realize how many things were going on. So thank you for doing all this and keeping us posted.
And thank you for inviting me. And if you take anything from all what I did, take this quote that I love. Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person a potential activist, and every minute a chance to change the world. The hope is for us to create, not for us to wait for somebody else to give us the hope that we're waiting so much for. And please look at this. If you want to join Citizens Climate Lobby, I'm going to put these links on the chat. You can follow the news. You can follow the Glasgow pad, which is the official document. I'm also going to put some where you can find the official document. They're very complicated, but if you want to dive a little deeper on it, where you can find the official COP documents. And I want to close with, if you want to track, I love this website, and I think it's really useful and maybe can be useful for you in your city. It tracks climate action from non-state actors, including investors, industries, and municipalities, to follow the race to net zero. So I'm going to put all those links in the chat. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us and be part of the solution, because by being here and informing yourself, you're already doing something for the climate.
Thank you, Solemi. Really appreciate that. And thank you for being with us and providing us with all this valuable information. Finally, I feel like I understand most of this. When we were setting this up a couple of months ago and talking about it, we realized that none of us in the committee had any idea really what it was. And so I was fortunate enough to talk to Solemi a couple of weeks ago for about an hour, so I could really kind of get into what it is this is going to be. So thank you, Solemi, for all the time you put in just for us. And believe me, I will be in contact with your next trip out to the COP27, so that we can also participate with what you're doing. Was the ACE that is your program? What was that called again?
Action for Climate Empowerment, Article 12 of the Paris Agreement, and Article 6 of the Convention.
Okay, great. So Barrett, is there anything else?
No, I think Solemi wrapped it up very well. There's so much going on. I guess the only other comment I could make is, it's so easy to feel, well, this is such a big problem, and in the news you read about problems, not solutions. It's easy to feel alone, but in fact, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people cooperating like this to work on this issue. We really are on all this together, and the more we learn and the more actions we take together, the more impact we can have. And this is the thing we can do. So I appreciate our viewers and look forward to the continued community building.
All right. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you in a couple of months. And that's it for the Windsor Park Climate Conversation.